Welcome to Project Echo Flourish Connect. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Jennifer, did you want to remind everybody of some things regarding the CDP material?
Right. Thank you, Justin. So I'm working on reconciling all the attendance and information needed to get this CDP for you if you attended all 8 sessions and the nursing CEUs. I was looking at our surveys and it looks like I'm missing quite a few nursing license numbers. So if you can email me those, that would be awesome. It's required to get to CEUs. And what was the other thing, Justin? If you haven't completed the survey from the final survey from last week, please do so. I hope to get all these in by end of next week. For the CDP, what's going to happen is I'm going to go in to the website and check you off if you've attended the required sessions, and then you'll get an email and you'll complete that and we'll pay for it, but you just need to complete the information. I think that's it. Maybe I need coffee too.
It's definitely 2 o'clock and not 10 o'clock, right? We're feeling a little that after lunch slump, as they say.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so just as a reminder, we are transitioning. This is week 18. We are moving into behavioral health and trauma-informed interventions. And then week 22 through the 24th, we'll look at health disparities and social determinants. So at the end of today's session, we'll have a survey for week 18. So please complete that. And this is just our disclosure that today's presenters have nothing to disclose, and this is our continuing education information. So now I will introduce today's presenter, Dr. Sam Cotton and Miss Barbara Gordon.
Hi, everyone. And I see Barbara's with us. Hey, Barbara.
Hi, I'm here.
Yay, hi. So Barbara and I are going to be talking to you all today about age-friendly and trauma-informed care, and really focusing on the creation of trauma-informed and age-friendly cultures of care within your nursing facilities. So if you'll recall, about 18 weeks ago, when we first started this journey together, we started off by talking about age-friendly healthcare systems and trauma-informed care with just a very basic introduction. So the next 4 sessions that we're going to do are all going to be focused on these topics and taking a deeper dive. So we're going to be talking about today how to foster that culture of really care and understanding within your nursing facilities. And we're really going to discuss some of those strategies for fostering that, how to create those cultures of care. And that's really our goal for today. Now, in subsequent sessions, starting next week, we're going to focus on taking that deeper dive in some different areas and how to use various trauma-informed and age-friendly interventions. So for example, next week, we're going to focus on behavioral health interventions that align with this, that might be particularly helpful for those of you who have residents who are really struggling with maybe depression or anxiety or even aggression and agitation. So we're going to focus on that next week, and then subsequently social isolation, and then self-care strategies will be our 4th week that we'll focus on, all within this umbrella of age-friendly and trauma-informed care. So before we get started with what we have planned for today, I want to explain that I know in previous Project Echo sessions, we had started with a case study, and we do have one today, a case to discuss that I'm not sure if it was somebody from this group or somebody from the morning session that submitted it, but because of the way we're doing today's session, it made more sense to put it at the end because it kind of falls within that trauma-informed care piece. So I wanted us to have that larger discussion before we went through the case and kind of talked about some strategies. Before we get started with the rest of this, though, I do want to check in and see, does anybody have any challenges that they're dealing with this week or any issues that they'd like to bring to the team to talk about? It doesn't have to be age-friendly and trauma-informed. We could probably connect it somehow because a lot of these things are related. Are we good? Okay. Well, if that's the case, let's go ahead and get started. And if you think of anything at the end, we can also, given how quickly I speak, we probably have time at the end as well. So I want to take a step back and also say that I recognize that in some of the content that we're talking about today, because of the nature of the rising COVID cases that you might be experiencing at your sites, some of the staffing issues that I've heard you all talk about, you might be thinking, oh, this is not really relevant to, I don't have time for this, right? I can't be age friendly when I'm dealing with all these crises at my particular facility. And you might be thinking this is just adding something to your plate. But what I want to say is that we really want to take the time to cultivate that space, to think about creating those stronger systems of care. And sometimes, having this very deliberate approach by being age friendly or focusing on the trauma-informed culture within our facilities might help us in the long run. And it might actually help us mitigate especially some of the challenging mental health related issues that are happening for residents because of the pandemic. Really helping us focus on that in the long term. And with the staff piece too, we're going to talk a little bit about trauma-informed culture for staffing too, because I think that will really help in terms of some of those challenges that we're seeing with that particular piece. So how do these concepts intersect? Well, when we talk about age-friendly and trauma-informed care, I don't want us to really think about them as being these separate, diverging kind of concepts. They really do intersect. So for example, when we talk about age-friendly, we have the domains that we focus on and prioritize in terms of resident care and developing those plans of care that are focused on those areas. And sometimes there might be challenges that come up for individuals. For example, within mentation, which is one of the 4 M's, we talk about everything related to that person's mental health, right? It's not just brain health, it's also really actualizing or helping individuals actualize some of those mental health components. And so trauma that could have happened when that older adult was much younger can really have an impact on some of their overall mental health challenges that they're dealing with today. So making sure that we really understand that these things intersect and really play a part in the individual's overall care. So let's do real quick. Does anybody remember when we talked about the 4 M's before of age-friendly healthcare systems, what the 4 M's were? I gave you one already because I used mentation in my example, but do you all remember what the other 3 are? You can unmute yourself, shout it out, or put it in the chat. Barbara, you want to help them out? You're on mute.
Yes, there we go. We had someone put medication in.
Yes.
That's very correct.
Yeah, medication is one. So we have mentation, medication, yes.
Mobility, yes, mobility, mentation. What's one of the ones that we talk about often? We've talked about often throughout probably every session at some level. It revolves around the patient, the resident. What matters most to the patient, to the resident? What matters most?
I want to step back and say too, as it relates to what matters most, at your facilities, you might call it something else. You might have a specific activity that you're doing with your residents to better understand them and their unique needs. And so, that's kind of a mouthful too, what matters most. Earlier in the session this morning, somebody called it meaning, which I think is also very relevant to that piece because it's how people make meaning in their life every day. So these are the 4 M's, the 4 domains that we focus on within age-friendly healthcare systems. And I want to point out that within your facilities outside of what matters most, where you might be calling it something else, but you're still trying to actualize and better understand what's going on with your residents and what they care about, what motivates them, what makes them happy, brings them joy. You're probably also doing things in these other domains, and maybe you're not characterizing it in the same fashion, right? But really taking that step back and focusing in on realizing that this is all part of age-friendly healthcare systems is very important in terms of really helping think through maybe projects within your facilities that can help better resident outcomes, really help in terms of defining the day-to-day care that you're providing. And it also helps us recognize what's going on with an individual when we see those changes over time. So for example, if an individual, maybe they came in very mobile, didn't have an issue with, navigating their space, no risk for falls, and suddenly you start seeing them having mobility issues. It helps you kind of step back and say, okay, what's going on here? What level of care do we need to be providing to this individual now? What are their needs, and how can we better help them as they continue to find this particular piece of their life challenging. So again, this is a way to conceptualize the care that you're providing, but what it also does is help us, assess some of those risks that individuals are dealing with and identify those strategies. And it really helps create this culture within the nursing facility to be more focused on those age-friendly practices. And again, I want to just highlight that a lot of you are already doing some of this work and maybe not necessarily calling it this because of just the nature of what we do in nursing facilities. So how do we better infuse age-friendly healthcare into our organizations? Well, since we last spoke about age-friendly specifically, now I know it's been kind of infused in some of our other content, but we haven't really taken this deeper dive into this area since, weeks 1 through, I think, 3 or 4. The Institute for Healthcare Improvement is actually came out with a guide for how to care for older adults in nursing homes. And I think they, if you look at this particular document, it was issued back in March, which came out after we started going down this road, even though I probably explained some of the principles of this when we first talked about age-friendly healthcare systems. So this particular guide, if you want to scan the QR code on the right-hand side of the screen, it'll actually pull up directly the PDF for you with this information. If for some reason you're not able to get it to work properly, we'll send you the link after today's session so that you have a copy of this. But it's a really great toolkit for really thinking through how to infuse age-friendly healthcare systems into your nursing facilities and how to really develop that culture of let's focus on these areas and be more proactive versus reactive related to situations and providing resident care. And they have a kind of a prescribed workflow or as part of their toolkit that can help you in terms of thinking this through. And the first step is to really create a team of champions for age-friendly healthcare and better understand what you're already doing. So I started today by talking about the fact that, we really don't want to add something else to your plate, right? We want to enhance what you're already doing. And what this toolkit allows you to do is really take that deeper dive and figure out, okay, who are the residents that live in my facility? What does this look like? What's our resident population that has ADRD or Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, for example? And what are we already doing to assess in these 4 areas? What are we already doing in terms of age-friendly healthcare, or I'm sorry, what matters most? What are we already doing related to mentation, medication, and mobility? And looking to see, how what you're already doing aligns, but also what you can do moving forward in terms of the work that, in optimizing some of the work that you're doing. This particular toolkit also allows you to think about other ways to improve some of the care that you're providing in these focused areas, especially related to thinking about what matters most, because a lot of you are already assessing constantly, probably related to the other 3 M's. So you're constantly noting medications. you're probably looking at cognitive challenges or mental health challenges with individuals and trying to figure out ways to address those. And mobility is also another thing that you're probably acutely aware of on a day-to-day basis, and those changes that you might be seeing in individual residents. But as it relates to what matters most, really thinking about, how are we better spending that time with residents to figure out what brings them joy, what do they care about, because really that can help drive some of the other areas of their life. For example, you might have a resident who's not really engaging in activities, right? Your activities director might be wonderful and coming up with all these creative ideas, but you might have several residents who are just not engaging. They're just sitting in their rooms. They're socially isolating, which we know has both mental health and physical repercussions for them long term. So really figuring out ways to find out what brings them joy, what sparks joy for them, so that they are more engaged in some of the activities that are happening. This toolkit also helps you really start thinking about what are some strategies for training staff in this area, particularly CNAs or other direct support workers who are providing the day-to-day activities of daily living related care to individuals. Some strategies that I've seen other nursing facilities take that I've worked with is that they might spend, 1 month of their in-service training might be focused on one of the 4 M's. So they provide additional training to staff so that they can recognize some of the challenges that individuals might be facing, or even how to start that conversation with individuals about, that meaning piece or that what matters most piece, because sometimes that can be difficult, right? If you're working on the floor, you've got a task of like, a to-do list a mile long, and you're trying to attend to all of the residents' needs, and also managing any of those fires that come up along the way. So really, how do we figure out how to help them take that step back and really have that very deliberate conversation with the individuals that they're providing care with? Because sometimes those are even in small settings, or even in a small amount of time, those conversations that our CNAs could be having with residents can really help drive that plan of care piece as well and help us better integrate this. And then the toolkit also helps in terms of thinking about how do you measure this and how do you look at some of these different areas that the individual is dealing with. Perhaps maybe they need more targeted things related to mentation. Maybe they're really struggling in terms of their behavioral health. For example, they're dealing with a lot of severe depression or anxiety. And so figuring out how do we assess that and create those plans of care, but also measure across the board what we're doing. So I've shared this toolkit with you. What I strongly encourage you to do moving forward is for you to really take a look at that particular toolkit, figure out and do the assessment of your facility, see what you want to work for, what are your goals related to this particular piece, and determine who are going to be your age-friendly champions from your facilities. And then assess your facility. What are you already doing? Again, not reinventing that wheel, but really focusing in on how do we move forward and figure out some of these different pieces of the puzzle that we're not attending to that could be an asset to our team. And I want to highlight too that you might be thinking, gosh, we do so much in terms of quality measures and collecting data and all of that. But I want to say that an added bonus to this strong emphasis on age friendly is that it does very, like all the domains, if you really look at them, you can align them with the quality measures that you're having to report to CMS on. So this might be an added bonus for you to focus in on that. And so I really encourage you, if you have an MDS coordinator or RN manager who's focused on those areas and helping collect that data, that they are a critical part of your team, because those are the individuals who probably know a lot more about the functioning of, how it is that your quality measures are being reported and all of that. And so can provide some greater insight into that particular piece and really have an opportunity to implement changes that can have an impact on those quality measures as well. The other thing I want to highlight with this is that through the Institute for health improvement. They actually have a certification that people can receive after they've went through the process of doing the assessment and putting into place this focus on age-friendly. So you can become a designated age-friendly nursing facility. And so not only does that look really good, but it also helps in terms of just showing that emphasis on quality care within the nursing facility for those residents that you're providing care to. Barbara and I have worked with other organizations through this particular process, so we would be more than happy to send you more information if you're interested, or answer any questions that you might have after you've reviewed that particular toolkit to see how it kind of interfaces with what you're already doing, and really help provide any feedback or guidance on that particular piece. So please reach out to us if that's something you're interested in doing. I know that it's, again, really great from the approach of creating that culture of care that's focused within age-friendly healthcare systems, because it enables you to spend that deliberate time training all of your staff in these various principles as well. And I wanted to do a check-in and see if anybody has used any of the 4Ms in practice since we last spoke, or if after revisiting this information today, there's something you're really doing well that you want to showcase to everyone, particularly related to that what matters most piece. That you want to share. We had somebody share this morning. They were doing a program called All About Me, where they received information when individuals first came to the facility or moved to the facility as part of their intake, and they shared that across all of the different staff who are working with that individual, just so that they had a better understanding of what mattered most to that person. So anybody have anything they would like to share? I know you all are doing great work out there. This would be a great time to showcase it. Oh, we're shy this afternoon. We've got that afternoon, those afternoon tired's, huh? Well, I will tell you from this morning, the person who shared what I thought was really cool and something that you all might take back from that All About Me program was that the way that they were able to share this across all the different staff was they actually printed out, like formatted it in a way that it was succinct and on a short piece of paper, and they laminated it, and then they put it on the resident's bathroom so that anybody who was going into that person's room and providing the care to them, they were able to see that information and immediately connect with it. And so that was an easy way for them to communicate across shifts of staff who are working with residents. So something to consider. I don't know if you all are already doing something like that in your sites, but something to think about. Okay. Well, now if no one has anything to share, and if you think of something you'd like to share, you can always put it in the chat. Feel free to do that. I'm going to move us on to trauma-informed care. Okay, so remember we talked about how age-friendly and trauma-informed care really interfaced and how important that is. And as I recall from the last sessions where we talked about this and we did the brief introduction, a number of you mentioned that you'd had more targeted training and education on trauma-informed care as part of the work that you were already doing. And what I want to say to that is I want us today to focus not just on the individual trauma that people may have dealt with, but how to develop that culture of care within our nursing facilities, where we're focusing on putting in the pieces of the puzzle related to trauma-informed care as well. So creating an organizational culture that recognizes that everyone interacts with that facility may have a past traumatic experience that we may or may not know about. And so we want to make sure that we're really doing that deliberate focus on figuring out how to infuse this across the board. So again, obviously we want to recognize that individuals have faced trauma, but from the standpoint of the whole organization, what are we going to do in terms of making sure that everybody who interacts with that? And I was thinking a lot about this in terms of the interaction piece. And sometimes I think we focus a lot on residents and the trauma that they have faced, but we have other individuals who are part of the residents team who might not necessarily be in the nursing facility every day, but those family members who are coming to visit, who are, providing maybe that long distance caregiving to the individual in the facility, may have also dealt with some trauma, right? Because when we think about some of the different dynamics within family relationships, we know that those are so complex, right? So making sure that when we even meet with family members, that we recognize that there might be some complexity there in the dynamics between all of those individuals. So, taking that, sometimes it's all about taking that step back and figuring out how do we better understand what's going on. Now, sometimes within trauma-informed care, that doesn't always point us to this, very direct solution, right, for whatever the complexity is that individual is dealing with. And so we have to recognize that sometimes it's this critical problem solving that we're doing as part of our work as the nursing facility to try and figure that particular piece out. The other thing I want to say too is that we should always consider residents' past traumatic experiences in providing the best care for them. So at the more individualized level, really doing what I call reading between the lines sometimes. So really focusing in on those areas that an individual might not express to you outright, but that they're struggling with. An example of this is even like those small moments that an individual might have wherein they're really struggling. And this could align with, for example, medication from Age-Friendly Healthcare. Maybe you're having problems with a resident who doesn't want to take their medication, right? They become combative, they become agitated every time it's time for them to take those meds. And some of this could be related to even just a small situation that they had in their life, but it created a fear for them. And that maybe as a younger person, they were taking a medication, they got choked, right? Again, that's in the grand scheme of things, probably a very small situation that could have occurred for the individual, but it instilled in them that fear of swallowing their medication. And so, better understanding that, I think can help us in the way we approach the situation. Sometimes I think we make assumptions based on what we're witnessing or observing with the individual. And so we think they're just being combative or they're just being surly, so to speak, wherein, it could be a lot more related to that fear piece, right? And that lack of feeling safe when taking the medications. So even if it's not a larger traumatic event that happened for the individual, we always need to consider that particular piece. And when we talk about trauma-informed care, we want to focus in on the 3 R's. Is anybody familiar with the 3 R's? Can I get a show of hands if you're familiar? Okay, this is new for most of you because I'm not seeing any hands. So when we talk about the 3 R's, that's really the event that happened for the individual, whatever that traumatic event is, the experience of the event, and then the effect that it had on the individual. Now, I want to step back and say that sometimes the experience of the event is more focused on how that individual interprets what happened and the effect that it has. And it's really focused on that particular, like better understanding the trauma piece for the individual. So not everybody experiences the things in the same way, and really understanding that that's the case. So Barbara and I may have had a situation wherein, we experience similar traumatic events in our life, but she responds one way and I respond in a different way. So again, it's very contextual and based on the person. And Justin is asking me a very good point about why is it the 3 R's? It's because traditionally we talk about recognizing the event, recognizing the experience of the event, and recognizing the effect that the person has. So that's why it's called the 3 R's and not the 3 E's. It's because it's that recognition of what each of these is. Is that helpful, Justin? Did you think I had a typo there for a moment? And so our key takeaways here, and again, not to belabor this point too much, because I don't want to spend too much time on it, but not everybody's going to experience things in the same way. Not everybody's had who has experienced a traumatic event has had a negative effect of that event. So again, to that point I made about, for example, Barbara and I had very similar experiences that happened to us. I might respond wherein I would withdraw from the situation, not want to talk about it, and it have huge implications for my mental health. Whereas Barbara might have really great coping skills and a great social support system to deal with that particular event. And so she deals with it well. She doesn't have negative effects because of it. It doesn't mean that it didn't have an impact on her, but it doesn't affect her negatively and have that ongoing, lasting impact on her. We often also see negative impacts that are long lasting. So for example, I worked with a older gentleman who lived in a nursing facility several years ago. It was prior to the pandemic starting. And at that time, when I was first getting to know him, doing that rapport building and everything, I learned that about 10 to 12 years prior to my interactions with him, my work with him, that his wife had passed away in a traumatic vehicle accident that he was also in. So he had a lot of guilt related to that, but the negative impact on him was so extreme that when you would engage him about this and talk to him about it, he would respond as though it had happened a day ago, a week ago, as though it was a more recent event, because it had had such a profound negative impact on him. And it was really also creating this problem for him, not just for his mental health, but also his physical health, because he was ruminating on that particular situation, but not really talking about it. It was more of an internal rumination. And so again, that's a situation where he was having a very negative outcome because of something that had happened to him previously. And it took us a very long time in the nursing facility to figure out what it was that was causing some of his challenges related to this, because he didn't really just tell people what had happened. Obviously, we all knew that his wife had passed away, but did not know the extent of what had happened. And then again, just to highlight that point, 2 people can experience the same event and have very different outcomes. And so for him in this situation, it was very profound. For others, they might be able, again, to have those coping mechanisms to be able to talk about things, to be able to express themselves. And so you don't necessarily see those negative outcomes. The other thing I want to highlight too is that with older adults, we often see generational cultural norms that are really lingering for them and contribute to them not really wanting to talk about the trauma that they've dealt with. So they might not want to address it. Particularly in older adult men, we see this because of that generational conception of take it like a man, and those sorts of things that are very much still present for that generation. And so it might be hindering them in addressing and being able to talk about those traumas that they've faced. The gentleman I was mentioning in the previous slide with his wife passing away, it took us a long time for him to start talking about that because he really tried to hold it all in. He had been if I recall correctly, a firefighter when he worked. And so he had this like conceptualization of him being, a man and very, I can deal with this and I don't have emotions. So it was very difficult for him to really actualize being able to talk about it. The thing that once he started talking about it and opening up, that helped him be able to do that was engaging in art therapy, actually, and using we did an exercise where we were using like magazine clippings for him to put together a collage of different things that were meaningful for him, and taking that exercise away from him just talking about the situation, but being able to visualize some of the things that had happened in his life that had had a profound impact on him really helped him open up. So it's something to be aware in working with older adults, is that sometimes they try to mask that particular piece. There was a great story that somebody shared in the morning session about, Barbara, do you remember the specifics? It was an older adult living in that particular nursing facility.
Yes.
Where she was falling a lot, and it took them a while to figure it out because no one in the family wanted to talk about it. And she was falling a lot because there was a large degree of germophobia and trauma associated with germs in their family. And so she was not sitting down on the toilet. She would just squat. And so, of course, that was causing some balance issues for her. So she was falling quite a bit. But it took them a long time to figure that out because, there was some, I guess, when we started talking about it a little bit more, preservation of dignity for her, but also some of those generational things that she had dealt with too. Barbara, anything else I'm forgetting about that particular?
That's pretty much it. The only other thing I would add is that the person who shared this particular situation did discuss that they learned some things about this particular resident from the family member that was related to things that she experienced in the past, and including some things that potentially are trauma related that they didn't want to really share. But through the conversations, through the building of that relationship and trust, eventually the family members shared this information.
Yeah. So thinking about that as it relates to falls and not actually sitting, I see your comment. And so that can be, even small things like that can have an impact on, even just these other areas of an individual's life. So I think what I want to convey to you is that a lot of times people don't want to talk about it. And so it takes a while of building that rapport, building that relationship with individuals to better understand what's going on. And then sometimes it's the small, I shouldn't say it's small because it had an impact on that particular individual, but sometimes it's those, in the grand scheme of things, those things that are smaller within our life that have a greater impact. So it's not always, like the situation I explained with the husband or the gentleman I was working with whose wife passed away in this very traumatic accident. It's not always that type of trauma that people have faced. Sometimes it's other things in their life that have happened that are not always apparent, that we have to spend some time really focusing in on. So how do we go about doing this? I always suggest that you try to focus in on, again, this also goes back to what matters most in terms of the trauma piece, but during the intake process, really focusing in on what can we do during that particular process to better understand the residents who are coming into our facilities. And that's not just the trauma piece, that also has to do with the what matters most, because the more you understand about how they conceptualize the world and prioritize the world around them, I think it makes it easier in the long run for us to provide better care. For those folks who might be struggling with cognitive challenges, such as Alzheimer's disease related dementias, or maybe even just mild cognitive impairment, where you're not necessarily getting an accurate history of what happened, trying to do family interviews to the extent to which it's possible during the intake process is important. And then for those who are able to engage in, providing you with that narrative, really allowing them to have that space to talk about some of these challenges that they've dealt with throughout their life. So providing residents with the opportunity to share their life history, providing them with the opportunity to have this discourse about, even these small things that happened in their life that could have such an impact on them. And sometimes you want to involve your activities director in this particular piece, because, if there are ways in which you can have activities that are targeted towards this particular area, I think that it's going to be helpful overall. And again, I want to go back to something I said at the beginning of today's workshop, in that I completely understand that sometimes these things are difficult and have fallen by the wayside because of the pandemic, and that it could be challenging depending on what your unique staffing issues look like at the moment, right? But it's important to, think about how can we invest this time now, because it later on can be helpful. Again, some of the behaviors that we see with individuals can also be related to trauma that they've had experienced in their life. I've worked within nursing facility settings where there were male staff who were always present within the site, obviously, and female staff who had dealt with domestic violence or interpartner violence in their, like, before they came to the nursing facility. And so they reverted back to that feeling of not feeling safe when males were present in their company. So really struggling with that particular piece, and in particular with male staff. So being aware of that, because sometimes that doesn't always manifest as the person saying, I feel, not happy in this situation, or I'm uncomfortable in this situation. Rarely does it manifest that way, particularly for persons with cognitive challenges as well. Sometimes it's going to be behavior focused, right? So you might see somebody get more agitated, or they might even get aggressive in the situation that makes them feel uncomfortable. So just being aware that better understanding the why behind all of this is very important in terms of the overall care that we're providing. And when we talk about trauma-informed culture, right, we don't want to just focus on residents. We also want to think about staff and their needs. And again, I understand that a lot of us are still having staffing issues because of everything happening in the pandemic. And honestly, staffing issues probably predated the pandemic. We just talk a little bit about it more now because of some of the things that happened during COVID. But creating a culture of care for the folks who are providing the care is very important. And so what I want to highlight here is an opportunity for you all to receive additional training if you're not familiar with this particular model. Is anybody familiar with psychological first aid training? Have any of you all implemented that in your facilities? Seeing some heads shaking no. So this particular model of care was developed originally for first responders who were dealing with trauma over and over and over again. Over the last 4 to 5 years, it's really pivoted to not just include first responders, but also frontline workers in a number of different settings. And it really provides you with an opportunity to think about how do you foster within your organization or within your nursing facility those areas to help individuals be ready to deal with the stress of the job that they are doing. And I want to say in particular, outside of the pandemic, we know that that was obviously a very stressful situation for a lot of our frontline workers, a lot of our CNAs, all of you, obviously you were on this and dealing with some of that. And it was because of the nature of it, we had to do a lot of reacting on the spot, right? Because we didn't have a plan in place for dealing with some of these things. Outside of that, working with persons with who might be living in the facility who are dealing with Alzheimer's disease or related dementias can also have that same effect on individuals, because you're constantly having to respond to some of the challenges that those individuals are dealing with. And so I want to really highlight this and show that, for some individuals, if we look at the stress continuum, they're ready. They're ready to jump in. They've got this sense of purpose, sense of mission. They feel ready from a whole perspective to be able to jump in and do the work that needs to happen with residents at the nursing facility. But when you get to the point where on the continuum you're hitting that critical piece or that injured piece, it's really problematic. That's where we see compassion fatigue. That's where we see a lot of burnout. That's where we see a lot of things getting lost in the shuffle, so to speak, for the individual. Maybe they're not able to actualize those tasks that they're supposed to be doing with residents every day because they're dealing with some of these very intense personal things that are stemming from the job atmosphere. So they might be dealing with anxiety, depression, those panicking moments, the panic attacks, feeling out of control or feeling this loss of purpose. And so, day in and day out dealing with that means that their batteries are not recharged, right? So they're not ready to jump in when those critical things happen within the nursing facility. So from this particular stress continuum model, if you take the psychological first aid training, they go over this stress first aid model about how to create this calming atmosphere, this connectivity among individuals within the nursing facility, and how to get back to that wellness piece where individuals feel back in that, the readiness category to jump in to do the work with the residents. And so it's a really great tool. I have this QR code if you're interested. What I have here, I've actually went through and done this particular module. It's really great, a lot of information, and you can tailor it to whatever meets your needs at your facility. But if you want more information, scan this. We'll also get you the link. This one is through Coursera, which is a free, massive open online course platform. It does take 7 hours to complete, but it's self-paced, so you don't have to do it all at once. You can take your time in going through all the different things. And what I would suggest doing is, choosing someone to be a champion for this within your site, who can go through this particular training and then come back and train others in some of these models of taking care of yourself, especially that self-care piece that might be very helpful for individuals who are, again, if you're sensing your staff are burnt out and really struggling with some of the challenges of the day-to-day, which is understandable, but how do we help create these tools for them to help them really be able to jump in? So that's that. There's also another one, if you're interested, I'll go and look at the link. I've not personally done that one, but it's through the Red Cross, and I believe it might be free as well, but we can send you that information. So do you have any questions? Does anybody have any cases that they want to talk about? Okay, we do actually have a case. Do we have time? Oh yeah, we have plenty of time. So we do actually have a case that someone submitted. And again, I'm not sure if it was from this cohort or the morning cohort. And again, the reason that I put it at the end was because I wanted to point out some of the trauma pieces from the staff standpoint. So somebody submitted they were having issues with staff presenting with vaccine hesitancy, and in particular, not wanting to get the booster. Is anybody having this problem on the call? Yeah, I'm seeing some head nods. Okay. So I wanted to highlight a couple of things related to this piece and then also offer suggestions, because the article that I found was interesting in terms of talking about staff trauma, but it doesn't really provide you with some solutions. So this particular, if you want to read more about this, just to have a better understanding on this particular piece, I also have the QR code here. But the association, research has been done to show that there's an association between having adverse childhood experiences. So for those of you who have went through the more in-depth trauma-informed training, you know that we usually refer to those as ACEs, that they tend to have more hesitancy towards vaccines and also some of the COVID-19 restrictions. And I think in particular, if you read the summary here, it's 3 to 4 individuals who had oh wait, 4 or more ACEs. So the score on that particular assessment tool, were more prone to having vaccine hesitancy. So things that could have happened during that individual's childhood could have an impact on them feeling like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to get this particular vaccine booster anymore, right? I'm done. I'm over it. And so again, this particular article, very interesting. And again, there's the QR code for you as well. But if you want to talk a little bit more about this particular piece, I do have some suggestions that we can share. Because again, this is just more about like the association between those two things and individuals having trauma, and less about the information related to how do we help guide people through this, right? And if you're struggling, I know what you want some solutions or some suggestions. So in terms of thinking about this, when you're approaching staff who might have this hesitancy, what we typically suggest is that, you start a conversation by, addressing that piece. And you might say something to the effect of, may I ask why? And I know that sometimes that opens up a can of worms, right, with the individual. So you need to be prepared to engage in that conversation with them and to really listen and to really have a better understanding of the what their concerns are about this particular piece. Because from a trauma-informed care standpoint, then you really want to be able to better open that communication for them, right? And allow them to, tell you or explain to you what's troubling them and why they're feeling hesitant. A lot of times for individuals, they might have heard things about the booster or heard things about this, that, or the other related to it. So you might want to just ask them what they've heard about that particular piece, and then counter any misinformation that they might have from social media or word of mouth. Be prepared to provide them with some facts about the vaccine, about the booster, and you really want to tailor your message anytime you're speaking to anyone who's having hesitancy about this. But as it relates to that particular piece, your message, I would think, having worked in a nursing facility before, would be to think about the care of, this vulnerable population that you're working with, and then also protecting themselves as well. Now, does that mean they're not going to get COVID at some point? No, not necessarily. We know that that's not how necessarily the vaccine works, but it can help in terms of, moving forward, the severity of it, and also protecting, again, those vulnerable populations that they're working with. So those are some solutions that I thought I would throw out there for those of you who are really struggling with this particular piece. But I think sometimes when this happens, we want to often come at this from the standpoint of, oh, I just don't understand this, or you feel frustrated with your staff, about this particular piece. But I want to tie you back to the article that I shared earlier about the trauma piece, and just having that frame of reference. Again, that doesn't always provide a better solution to the issue, but it can also help you better understand and have that conversation with the staff that are struggling. Is that helpful? Yeah, okay, good. I'm seeing some head shaking. Does anybody have any questions about that piece? I also have, and Justin, if you'll remind me, I need to send this because I didn't have a link for it at the time this morning when we talked about this, but I also have a link of from Johns Hopkins about different and more information about the vaccine and how to approach it in terms of talking about it when you're talking to someone who has that vaccine hesitancy. And we can share that tool with you as well, which might be helpful in guiding those conversations. And Teresa, I see your chat about not getting emails each week. We will make sure that we have this email on file for you. All right, any questions, any comments? That was a lot of information, I know. Okay, we're gonna go back to, if I can get back to this piece. case, okay, so, I want to also really quick before I turn it back over to Justin. So next week, we're going to be talking more about behavioral health related things, and how residents sometimes are struggling, and those behavioral health pieces really manifest as behaviors. Now, we alluded to that a little bit today, but we'll talk a little bit more about it in detail next week. And so we'd love to hear from you. If you have a resident who's really struggling with a particular behavior that you need to, talk through or get some suggestions on, or just some feedback on, or think about it through the lens of this trauma-informed, age-friendly healthcare approach, please fill out the case study form. There's the QR code here. And then there's also the link that Justin put in the chat as well.
Thank you, Sam. And here is the week 18 session survey, and I'll put the link in the chat. And so just remember, like, if you have a case study to present or for us to present, please click the first link. And for the session survey today, please click the second link, and this is session 18. So if you have any questions for Sam or Barbara, please hang out. Sam, you'll be talking about depression and anxiety next week. Just froze.
Yes,
Okay.
there's a lot of freezing going on today.
Yeah, my internet's really unstable right now.
Sam, you may not know this, but you froze for a few seconds.
Oh, did I? When was?
Yeah,
I didn't even realize.
yeah,
I just kept going.
right.
Did
Yeah.
my audio catch up?
No, I don't think so. I didn't hear anything. Did you, Justin?
I didn't, so I was frozen on my end. I never noticed Sam freezing on her end, but it could have been
Yeah.
at the same time.
Oh, shoot. Well, it's hard for me to tell because you all are all over to the side of my screen, so I can't see it.